When I got to the restaurant, I was 10 minutes early and already suspicious. The doorman glanced at my name with practiced blankness. "Sorry, ma'am. I don't have you on the guest list." I didn't blink. Camille Porter should be under the Porter family 30-year anniversary dinner. He skimmed the tablet again, this time slower, like maybe I'd materialized between lines. "There's a reservation under Porter, yes, but your name isn't included. It's a private room." That was when it clicked. It wasn't a mistake. It was her. I looked past him through the frosted glass partition. Inside, the long mahogany table was already set. I saw them all, my in-laws' cousins, a few close friends, even some new faces. My husband Noah sat near the middle, laughing nervously, clearly unaware of the betrayal unfolding on the sidewalk. But his mother... She looked straight at me through the glass, and she smiled. Not kindly, not politely, like a cat watching a bird fly into a window. I let out a sound before I could help it, a breathless half-laugh, half-snort. I think the doorman thought I was about to cry. But I wasn't. I was done crying over this family years ago. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the number under M. Not mom. Not manager. Just Marcelo saved with a tiny fork and knife emoji. He picked up on the second ring. "Camille!" His voice boomed unmistakable. "Are you finally back in the city? I didn't explain. I'm outside your restaurant. Door guy says I'm not on the guest list." Silence. Then a chuckle. "Give him the phone." I handed it over. The doorman's posture changed so fast it was almost poetic. "Yes, sir. Of course, sir. I understand." When he gave it back, his face had softened into something like apology. "Please, Ms. Porter, right this way." I walked in like I owned the place. Because in a way I had. The room fell quiet when the door opened. Noah looked up, startled. His eyes darted between me and his mother. "Camille, I thought—" She cut him off. "You said you weren't feeling well." I stared at her. "I said I wasn't feeling well about coming here when I saw you'd left me off the invite." Aunt Jo coughed. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. I didn't wait for permission. I turned to the server stationed at the door. "Can I have a small table near the corner?" "Just one chair, preferably facing this direction." He nodded, already moving. My mother-in-law tried again, her voice syrupy. "This is an intimate family gathering, Camille. We wanted to avoid any tension." I tilted my head. "So you chose Exclusion Classic." Noah stood up, unsure if he should come to my side or stay seated. "Mom, did you seriously?" "Don't," she snapped low and tight. "Let's not ruin the evening." "Oh, I won't," I said, smiling. I planned to enjoy every bite. The table they'd given me was technically out of view, but everyone still knew I was there. The energy shifted, people whispered. Eyes flicked between their cocktails and my posture, and all the while I sat quietly like the storm they pretended wasn't coming. I ordered the tasting menu. I knew exactly what to ask for. I'd helped design it. The amuse-bouche came first, a beet foam canapé with a drizzle of yuzu aioli. It wasn't even on the printed menu yet. A test item. Reserved for insiders and loyal patrons. Marcelo himself brought it out. "My sincerest apologies, Camille," he said warmly, crouching to my level. "You'll always have a seat in my house." I thanked him. The tension in the room ratcheted another notch. When the wine arrived, paired with the trout roulette I'd personally greenlit 6 months ago, I caught my mother-in-law staring. Not in confusion, in calculation. She was starting to put it together. I let her. Across the room, Noah was clearly distressed. His fork was untouched. His drink sat sweating beside his plate. He glanced at me, then back at her, as if seeing both of us clearly for the first time in years. Marcelo returned during the main course, a pepper-crusted lamb with rosemary juice, and leaned close. "Would you mind joining me for a quick toast?" I arched an eyebrow. He grinned. "Trust me." I followed him without hesitation. He led me to the small presentation podium they'd set up for the anniversary toast, where the staff had planned to honor his VIP guests. Only now, Marcelo was adjusting the mic and gesturing toward me. "Before we move on to the champagne," he said, smiling at the room, "I want to take a moment to thank someone who made all of this entire evening possible. Not just the food, not just the ambiance, but the very survival of this restaurant. I stood still. Noah sat forward in his seat. Marcelo continued. 6 months ago, we were circling the drain. Quietly, desperately. Camille Porter walked in with a proposal, a plan, and frankly, the kind of fire most people only pretend to have. Murmurs rippled. She didn't just consult for us, he added. She revived us, saved our staff's jobs, reimagined the wine program, pitched new investors, the lamb you just ate. Her idea, the foam, her tweak. This celebration you're having, made possible by the woman your invitation forgot. He turned to me. Thank you, Camille. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Then I walked back to my little table. The silence this time wasn't polite. It was stunned. My name is Camille Porter. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a hospitality consultant. I don't run restaurants. I rebuild them from sinking margins and outdated menus to abusive management and broken service culture. Quietly, strategically. I don't need credit, just results. I live in a small, tastefully cluttered flat in the West End. I like my coffee black, my weekends slow, and my victories quiet. There's a chipped bone china teacup on my windowsill with a faded rose pattern my grandmother's. I never use it. I just keep it where I can see it. It reminds me that beauty and strength can live in the same fragile body. But I wasn't raised to think that way, especially not in the Porter family. From the beginning, I was an outsider, not because I didn't try, but because I wasn't what they expected. Noah and I met in our late 20s. He was the calm one, the easygoing youngest child adored by his parents, expected to marry well. I was the woman he loved, but never quite the woman they chose. His mother, Elaine Porter, made that clear before I even moved in. She had a knack for cloaking insults in lace. When she first saw our engagement ring, she smiled sweetly and said, very sensible. Not flashy. Camille's always been practical. She meant cheap. At the engagement party, she greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and whispered, Don't worry, honey. I've told everyone you're just shy. That's why you don't mix. At the time, I believed it was nerves, or maybe an overbearing personality. I told myself, she'll soften. They all do eventually. But she didn't. She just got better at freezing me out without anyone noticing. Holidays became endurance tests. I'd walk into rooms and watch her pick up conversation just loud enough for everyone to ignore my entrance. Every family photo somehow happened when I was in the bathroom or kitchen. When I made the mistake of bringing my signature lemon rosemary chicken to a Thanksgiving potluck, she loudly complimented her niece's store-bought green bean casserole instead. One time I offered to set the table. She smiled and handed me a dish rag. Make sure the counters are spotless, sweetie. Presentation matters. The wedding was the worst. Elaine insisted on booking the venue herself, choosing the table settings, and inviting half the guest list before I'd even seen a seating chart. When I finally put my foot down about the officiant, a dear friend from college, she called Noah in tears. She's ruining everything. She doesn't understand how we do things. We compromised, but only on paper. On the day of, she had a backup officiant waiting in the wings in case there was a mix-up. There wasn't. But the message was clear, she didn't trust me. Not with her son, not with her legacy. And Noah. He never quite knew what to do. It's not personal, he'd say. She's just traditional. No, she wasn't traditional. She was territorial. And I was the perceived threat. Still, I tried. I brought wine to every dinner. I praised her roast even when it was dry. I asked about her quilting club and listened as she explained the difference between batik and brocade like I was a child. I attended every christening, birthday, and hospital visit with a gift and a smile. And none of it mattered. She once told a family friend I worked in catering. When I gently corrected her, Actually, I'm a consultant. I specialize in turnarounds. She smiled and said, Oh yes, dear, you're very helpful. That's what I meant. Helpful, not skilled, not successful, just helpful. Over time, even the extended family picked up on it. Her cues were subtle but unmistakable. I was tolerated, not embraced. At barbecues, I'd get handed paper plates while others got china. When Noah's cousin got promoted, there was a toast. When I closed a 7-figure turnaround deal, Elaine said, That's nice. Will you still have time to help with the Christmas dinner? It wore me down. Not all at once, but slowly, like erosion. And Noah. He saw it, but not clearly. He loved me. But he loved peace more, and sometimes keeping the peace meant letting me take the hits. That realization hurt more than any of Elaine's jabs. The final straw came the week before the anniversary dinner. I was supposed to help organize it. I'd offered weeks in advance. Elaine smiled, nodded, and never called me back. Noah mentioned something about the venue being already set, but I didn't push. I was busy consulting for a restaurant on the verge of closure. It was a personal job. Marcelo, the owner, had once taught me everything I knew about risk, flavor, and faith. Saving his place meant something. What I didn't know then was that it was the same restaurant Elaine had chosen for the dinner. Not because she knew I was involved, but because she didn't. I was invisible enough that she didn't even connect the dots. And Marcelo, he hadn't known either. I never told him my married name was Porter. Everything about this screamed fate. The night I learned I wasn't invited, I didn't cry. I just sat in our living room, looking at the RSVP email Noah had forwarded as an afterthought, and stared at the words, family dinner, 30th anniversary, intimate guest list only. No mention of me, no seat. When I confronted him, he looked genuinely confused. I thought maybe you'd told her you were too busy with work. I shook my head slowly. You think I wouldn't remember being banned from a family dinner? He paled. She didn't ban you, I just turned my laptop around. Then why am I not on the list? He said nothing. That silence broke something I didn't even know was still intact. I stood up. I hope the lamb's cooked right, I said softly. It's my recipe. He blinked. What you'll see. The first time I saw the books, I knew Marcelo's place had 6 months left, 8, if the landlord kept pretending he hadn't noticed the partial rent checks. It was called Nocturne, a once-acclaimed French-Asian fusion spot on 56th. The kind of restaurant that had a New York Times write-up framed in the bathroom hallway, and a wine list that hadn't been updated since the Obama administration. The velvet chairs were wearing thin, the front staff were underpaid and over-apologetic, and the chef, brilliant but stubborn, refused to make anything gluten-free because it disrespected the art. Marcelo called me when he was desperate enough to listen. He used to say I had the cleanest palate of any student he'd trained. Camille, he once told me, you don't just taste food, you listen to it. I never forgot that. When he reached out, I hadn't been back in his world in years. I'd been cleaning up boutique hotels and mid-level resorts, the kind of jobs that came with spreadsheets and jargon, not heart. I missed the soul of real restaurants, missed watching a dining room shift from panic to poise. So I said yes. I spent the first week sitting in the corner taking notes on everything. How the servers spoke, what dishes returned unfinished, how the noise pooled awkwardly around the marble walls, and how the dessert menu didn't align with the dinner pacing. No one suspected anything. I looked like someone's bored cousin. But on Friday, I sent Marcelo a 2-page memo. Saturday, I brought in new flatware samples. By Monday, I had a 12-week turnaround plan and a staff meeting scheduled. We cut the menu by 30%, redesigned the logo, hired a pastry chef who understood restraint, and brought in a wine director who had taste and grace. I taught the servers to pitch the revised tasting menu with warmth, not obligation. And in week 3, I handed Marcelo a prototype for the new lamb dish. Herb-crusted, he asked, brow raised. With crushed pink peppercorn and a rosemary reduction, I said. It's bold without being aggressive. He tried it. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he nodded. This is it. The team called it Camille's Lamb from then on. By month 2, we were fully booked Friday through Sunday. Weekday numbers were climbing. The local magazine ran a profile on Nocturne's quiet resurrection. I declined to be named. I didn't want credit. I wanted security for the people inside. For Marcelo. For the chef who'd finally agreed to a gluten-free alternative. But fate had other plans. It was Marcelo who brought me the news casually, like it wouldn't set my jaw on fire. Elaine Porter, he said, scanning his tablet. Big reservation, anniversary dinner, booked the private room. I paused, still flipping through the supplier inventory on my screen. Elaine Porter? I asked. He nodded. You know her. I gave a small laugh. You could say that. It wasn't rage that followed. It was something slower, heavier, like the moment just before a wave breaks. I asked to see the reservation list. My name wasn't on it. Not under Camille Porter. Not under Camille, anything. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. Marcelo's eyebrows knit together when I didn't speak. You okay? I smiled more than, because in that moment I saw it all play out. The setup, the reveal, the irony so sharp it practically shimmered. I didn't have to plot revenge. I just had to wait. I spent the next few weeks quietly preparing the private room for the Porter's celebration. I didn't touch the guest list, didn't ask to be added. That would have spoiled the symmetry. Instead, I made sure every dish was flawless. I walked through lighting checks, approved the champagne upgrade, and arranged for the custom cake topper that Elaine had insisted on, an overly ornate ceramic sculpture that looked like it belonged in a Regency dollhouse. Marcelo didn't ask questions. He trusted me. And I made sure Nocturne would deliver the most unforgettable evening of Elaine Porter's life. By the time the dinner arrived, everything was in place. Elaine believed she'd booked the restaurant on her reputation alone. She had no idea that the menu she chose, the wine she drank, and the ambiance she bragged about were all shaped by the woman she thought unworthy of her family. That was the beauty of it. She didn't just dine in my restaurant. She dined in my blueprint. And when she tried to exile me from it, the place itself welcomed me back. Poetic. Noah, for all his blind spots, had no clue either. I hadn't told him about my involvement with Nocturne. After the RSVP email debacle, we'd barely spoken beyond logistics and surface talk. Our marriage had been strained for a while, worn thin by years of divided loyalties and small daily betrayals. But still I loved him, and I knew this dinner would break something open. I just wasn't sure what would remain standing. After Marcelo's toast, there was a pause too long to be polite, too short to ignore. Elaine's face was motionless, frozen in a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of smile that cracked porcelain. Her fork rested neatly beside her plate. Her knuckles were pale where she gripped the stem of her wine glass. Noah didn't blink. His eyes were fixed on me the way someone watches a building they'd once lived in burn from the inside. Marcelo handed me the microphone before I could refuse. I didn't plan to speak. I never needed the spotlight. But there's a moment when silence becomes complicity, and I'd been complicit for too long. I took a breath. I wasn't going to say anything I said, and my voice carried across the room without trembling. But since we're all here, and since you've all eaten the lamb, I guess it's only fair to say a few words. A few cousins chuckled nervously. I didn't smile. I've spent the last few months working with Marcelo and the team to bring Nocturne back to life. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I believe in saving what's worth saving. I let that sit. And I'll be honest, when I found out this dinner was here and that I hadn't been invited, I thought maybe I'd just show up for dessert. Quietly. Take a seat in the corner and leave unnoticed. But then I realized that was just another version of what I've always done. Shrink myself. Stay silent. Let people pretend I'm not in the room. I met Elaine's eyes. Not cruelly, but directly. Not tonight. Marcelo gently squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "You don't owe them anything." I nodded but kept the mic. "I know I've never been the daughter-in-law you wanted," I said. "And I know there were things about me, about my background, my career, maybe even my voice that made it easy to ignore me. But let me make one thing clear, I'm not here by accident. I didn't end up in this restaurant because of luck. I'm here because I built something, because I am something." Elaine started to speak, but her voice caught. Noah stood up. "Camille," I held up a hand. "Noah, sit." He did. And I kept going. "Your family sat at a table tonight and ate from a menu I created, drank from a wine list I restructured, toasted in a room I redesigned in a restaurant I saved. And I wasn't even supposed to be here." Someone, Aunt Jo, maybe whispered, "Oh my God." I turned toward the rest of the guests. "I'm not angry. Truly. I'm done being angry. But I want you to know something. I won't apologize for taking up space anymore. And I won't apologize for succeeding, especially not to people who never even bothered to see me." The silence this time was different. No shame. Just weight. The kind that fills a room when truth has no more corners left to hide in. I handed the mic back to Marcelo and returned to my seat. For a full minute, no one spoke. Then Noah stood again, slower this time. He walked over to my table and knelt beside me, ignoring the confused stares and the horrified glances from his mother. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I know." He looked up. "Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have listened." "Not really. You would have defended her or smoothed it over or made it about family harmony. And I was so tired of harmony that cost me myself." He reached for my hand. I let him hold it. But I didn't squeeze back. Not yet. Across the room, Elaine finally stood. She cleared her throat. Everyone turned. I had no idea. She began, her voice careful, deliberate. "About the restaurant. About all of it." Marcelo raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Elaine looked at me. "I suppose I owe you an apology." I sipped my wine. "Suppose you do." She took a breath. "I'm sorry, Camille. I underestimated you. And I disrespected you, for a long time." I nodded. She added, "I'd like to change that." I studied her. Not her words, her posture, her tone, the set of her mouth. She wasn't performing this time. She looked disoriented. Not just by shame, but by the collapse of a hierarchy she'd never questioned until it crumbled in public. And maybe, just maybe, a little odd. "You can start," I said, "by including me on the next guest list." Someone laughed. Tension broke. A few people even clapped. Elaine stepped back, sat down, said nothing more. But that was enough. Dinner resumed, more subdued, but more real. People approached my table. Quietly, respectfully. A few offered awkward congratulations. Some asked about the turnaround process. One cousin said, "Damn Camille, that was badass." I smiled for the first time all night. Noah returned to his seat, but he kept glancing my way. And me, I finished my lamb. Every last bite. It was 3 days after the dinner when Elaine showed up at my door. No warning, no flowers, just her and a recycled shopping bag with something wrapped in tissue paper inside. She stood there for a full 5 seconds before she spoke, like she wasn't sure if I'd shut the door on her or not. "I wanted to talk," she said. "If you'll let me." I stepped aside. She walked in like she hadn't been inside the place before, even though she had once just after Noah and I moved in. Back then, she criticized the lack of curtain rods and asked if we were saving up for real furniture. Now she sat gingerly on the edge of the couch, like it might reject her. "I brought you something," she said. She unwrapped the tissue, slowly revealing a tarnished silver spoon with initials carved into the handle. It was my grandmother's. She used it every Sunday when she made soup. I used it when I got married. I thought, maybe it should go to you. I didn't take it at first. I just looked at her. "That dinner was supposed to be perfect," she said, eyes locked on the spoon. And it was. In a way I didn't expect. Because for the first time, I saw what you were really made of. What you've been doing this whole time. There was no polish in her voice. No smugness. Just quiet resignation. "And what is that?" I asked. She looked at me. Building things, holding things together, quietly, invisibly. I said nothing. I didn't see it. Because I didn't want to. I was ashamed, I think, that someone I'd dismissed had become the backbone of something so meaningful. It was easier to pretend you were just an ornament. I laughed once, sharp and low. "I've never been ornamental, Elaine. You just didn't know what to do with a woman who didn't need you." She nodded slow. "I'd like to start over," she said. "Why now?" "Because it's embarrassing to admit, but I thought I was the matriarch, the one who carried legacy. But you," she paused, "you built a legacy while I was planning dinners. That's not just power, that's grace." I took the spoon from her hand. It was heavier than it looked. "I'll keep it," I said. "But don't think that fixes everything." She smiled. Not a smug smile. A tired, real one. "I wouldn't insult you like that." She stood to leave but turned once more at the door. "Camille." "Yes, next time we host anything, I'd like your help." "Actually help, not just wiping counters." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want my kind of influence? I'm counting on it." That same afternoon, Noah came home early. He stood in the doorway, watching me run a cloth over the windowsill, the old teacup still there beside the spoon. "She came here," he said. I nodded. He walked over and put a hand on my back. I'm sorry, I didn't move. What for? For all of it. For letting her talk to you that way. For standing on the sidelines while you fought every battle alone. I thought staying neutral was kindness, but really, it was just cowardice. I turned to face him. His eyes were soft but clear. Honest. I didn't need a knight, Noah, I said. I needed a partner. I know, he whispered. And if it's not too late, I'd like to be one. I looked at him for a long moment. It's not too late. He exhaled slow. I've never been prouder, he said. Of you, of what you did, of how you did it. And for the first time, I let myself believe it. At the next family event, a summer garden brunch at Elaine's house, things were different. I wasn't handed a dish rag. I wasn't left out of photos. Elaine actually introduced me to a neighbor as the woman who saved Nocturne. A few weeks later, the restaurant hosted a tasting series in my name. Marcelo insisted. He printed my name on the menu. The Camille sessions, it said. 5 nights, 5 themes, 5 dishes built on the kind of quiet strength most people overlook. We sold out every night. At the final dinner, I stood at the back of the room while the guests toasted, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Elaine, not at Noah, not even at the girl I used to be, the one who shrank herself to survive. I looked down at the silver spoon I'd tucked into my purse that night. A relic, a symbol. Something passed from one underestimated woman to another. It was time to make soup, real soup, on my terms, for people who knew the value of what was in their hands. Sometimes I still think about that first night standing on the sidewalk, told I didn't belong. The weight of that humiliation, the rush of clarity, the moment laughter became armor. But more than that, I think about what came after. How something so petty, so cruel became the opening act for everything I reclaimed. There's something sacred about choosing yourself quietly without fanfare. Not because you want revenge, but because you're done giving away your worth to people who only know how to spend it. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just showed up. And the universe did the rest. The silver spoon now sits next to my grandmother's teacup on the sill. 2 fragile things that endured generations of silence and still came out shining. They're not trophies. They're reminders. That legacy isn't inherited, it's earned. And sometimes it's rewritten. I'm no longer the woman who waits to be invited. I build the table, set the place, and make the damn meal. Not for approval, but because I know what it tastes like to go hungry. And I will never starve myself again. Not for family, not for peace, not for anything less. Also, more than what I deserve, see you. And finally, they know it too.